The horse refuses to move. It is January 3rd, 1889. Turin, Piazza Carlo Alberto. The cobblestones are cold and the morning air carries the particular smell of Italian winter. Coffee, stone, something burning far away. The driver of the hansom cab has run out of patience. He takes up his whip. And then a man runs, not slowly, not with hesitation. He crosses the square at speed, this heavy-set man with the enormous dark mustache and the thick-lensed spectacles that he is nearly blind without. He throws himself through the watching crowd. He reaches the horse. He wraps both arms around the animal's neck and weeps. Later, they will say he collapsed, that his landlord carried him home, that he lay silent and motionless for 2 days on a divan, that the last intelligible words he spoke were, Mutter, ich bin dumm. Mother, I am foolish. That he lived another 11 years without writing a word, without recognizing the faces of those who loved him. That man is Friedrich Nietzsche. And here is the question nobody has fully answered. How does the man who declared God is dead end up weeping over a horse in a street? That question is what this story is for. You are born on October 15th, 1844, in a presbytery. Not near a church, not beside one, inside one. Your father, Karl Ludwig Nietzsche, is the Lutheran pastor of Röcken, a village so small that the world will only remember it because of you. He is a gentle, musical man. He plays the piano, he is loved by his congregation, he was appointed to his post by the personal recommendation of King Friedrich Wilhelm IV of Prussia, on whose birthday you happen to arrive. This seems significant to everyone. They name you after the king. They baptize you and read from Luke. What then is this child going to be? The answer nobody expects. On your father's side, the men have been pastors since the early 17th century. Your grandfather was a theologian who published books defending Protestantism. Your maternal grandfather is also a country parson. You are, in the most literal sense, born from 4 generations of men who served God. The house you live in exists because of God. The food on the table, the warmth in winter, the standing in the village, all of it flows from a single source. Then, Karl Ludwig develops a brain disease. He suffers for a year, what the family calls softening of the brain. Some doctors later speculate it was a tumor. Others suggest he suffered a fall and never recovered. Whatever it is, it takes him slowly, piece by piece. He dies on July 30th, 1849. You are 4 years old. You are old enough to understand the absence, but not old enough to understand the theology of why a good and faithful servant of God would be taken from his children before they learned to read. 6 months later, your baby brother Ludwig Joseph dies. He is 2 years old. Your family loses its income. It loses its status. It loses the house, because the house belongs to the parish, and the parish needs a living pastor, not a widow. You move to Naumburg with your mother Franziska, your sister Elizabeth, your grandmother, and 2 aunts. The men are gone. The house is gone. The village is gone. You are 5 years old, and you are already living with the question that will consume the next 40 years of your life. If there is a God who watches over the good and the faithful, then where was he? By the time you are 12, the headaches begin. Not ordinary headaches. Migraines that arrive like invading armies. They take territory behind your eyes. They move into your stomach. They hold your skull for days. You vomit. You lie in darkened rooms while the world continues outside. You will spend the rest of your life losing, by your own later estimate, nearly a third of each year to these attacks. The question nobody ever asks about Nietzsche's philosophy is, what does constant pain teach a person? It teaches that the body is not optional. It teaches that willpower has a ceiling. It teaches that suffering is not ennobling by itself. It is only ennobling if you find a way to transform it into something. If you don't, it just destroys you. You go to Schulpforta in 1858, Germany's leading Protestant boarding school. You are 14. The school is run on military lines, cold rooms, strict discipline, Latin and Greek before sunrise. You excel. You always excel. You start a music and literature club called Germania. You teach yourself to compose music, to write verse. You are already the person who arrives with more than is asked for and stays longer than expected. At the University of Bonn in 1864, something cracks. Not dramatically, not with revelation. You try a fraternity, you try the normal life of a German student, and it doesn't fit. You move to Leipzig in 1865, and one afternoon in a second-hand bookshop, on a shelf you stumble past, you find a book called The World as Will and Representation by Arthur Schopenhauer. You read it in 2 weeks, without sleeping much. Here is what Schopenhauer tells you. The world is not a creation of divine purpose. The world is driven by a blind, directionless, insatiable force he calls the will, a churning that has no goal, no mercy, no end. All of life is the will expressing itself through suffering. There is no God who watches. There is no plan. There is only the striving and the pain of striving. You are 20 years old. You have been carrying this answer inside you since you were 4. What Schopenhauer gives you is the vocabulary. In 1868, at a dinner party in Leipzig, you meet Richard Wagner. You are 23. He is 54. He is already famous in ways you cannot imagine becoming. He is composing operas that feel like cathedrals of sound, total worlds, mythological and overwhelming. He plays excerpts from Die Meistersinger at the piano, and you sit in the corner of the room feeling something you have not felt since your father died. The sense that a man can create something larger than himself. That art can be a substitute for God. That music, the right music, can give life the meaning that theology used to provide. You become friends. You are given a professorship at the University of Basel in 1869. At 24, without even completing your doctorate, they want you that badly. You visit the Wagners at their villa in Tribschen regularly. You argue, you debate, you are made to feel like a member of a family. Your first book, The Birth of Tragedy, 1872, is dedicated to this world. It argues that the Greeks were great not because they were rational and balanced and sunny, as most 19th century scholars believed, but because they contained both the Apollonian, order, reason, beauty, and the Dionysian, chaos, ecstasy, the terrifying vitality of life itself. Great art, you argue, needs both. Greek tragedy was great because it held them together. Wagner's music does the same. The academic world finds this argument embarrassing. It is not philology, it is something between philosophy and propaganda. Your career as a classical scholar effectively ends with this book, but you are already moving on to what matters more. The break with Wagner is slow, painful, and necessary. You start to see him clearly, increasingly nationalist, increasingly anti-Semitic, increasingly willing to pander to a German audience that wants to feel superior. He is making God out of German blood and Teutonic myth. You are going the other direction entirely, away from Germany, away from tribalism, away from the kind of collective identity that feels, to you, like the smallness of the herd. Human, All Too Human, 1878, is the public announcement of the rupture. You write it in sharp, French-style aphorisms, deliberately un-German, deliberately rational, deliberately stripping the romantic fog from everything you used to venerate. Wagner receives a copy. He sends back a copy of the Bible. You never speak again. Your health collapses. By 1879, the migraines are so severe, so constant, that you have to resign your professorship. You receive a small pension from Basel. You are 34 years old, homeless in the sense that matters, without institution, without community, without a position in any existing tradition. You begin to wander. Sils Maria in Switzerland, Genoa, Venice, Nice, the Italian Riviera. You follow the weather, south in winter, north in summer, always looking for the climate that will keep the headaches quiet enough to write. You live in rented rooms, usually on the top floor because top floors are cheaper. You cook for yourself on a small stove. You write by hand, often in the dark, because light hurts your eyes. You walk for hours every day. The ideas come when you walk, they don't come any other way. In 1882, in Rome, you meet Lou Salome. She is 21. You are 37. She is brilliant in ways that match yours, already thinking at a level that makes most conversations feel like waiting. You fall in love with devastating completeness. You propose to her twice. The first time through your mutual friend Paul Ray, who also loves her. The second time directly. She refuses both times. Gently, she refuses. She wants friendship and intellectual companionship, not marriage. Your sister Elizabeth, who has always been jealous of anyone you love, writes Lou a letter poisoning her against you with rumors. Elizabeth is the one person in the world who has your attention, and she cannot share it. The friendship with Lou collapses. You write Ray a letter of anguish that you do not send. You write your mother that you are in despair. You sink into one of the worst periods of illness and isolation of your life. Bedridden, weeping, writing letters to people who will not come. And then you write Thus Spoke Zarathustra, all 4 parts between 1883 and 1885, in a white heat of productivity that you describe as something that happened to you rather than something you did. Zarathustra is a Persian prophet, not Christian, not German, not modern, who comes down from his mountain after 10 years of solitude to teach humanity what he has learned. The Übermensch is not a Superman in the comic book sense. It is a direction, a challenge, a question. What would a human being look like who created their own values, rather than inheriting them from religion or herd instinct? Who said yes to life, all of it, including suffering, including loss, rather than seeking escape in the afterlife? The eternal recurrence. Imagine you must live this exact life in this exact sequence, infinitely. Every joy and every agony, cycling forever without end. Could you live in a way that you would affirm that? Could you say yes? Amor Fati, love of fate. Not resignation, not acceptance. Love, the complete embrace of what is. But Zarathustra sells almost nothing. It is printed in tiny editions, distributed mostly to close friends who read it with puzzlement. You are writing for a world that doesn't know it needs you yet. The year 1888 comes. You have moved to Turin, and something strange happens. You feel good. For the first time in years, the headaches ease. The city suits you. Its wide colonnaded arcades, its ordered grid of streets, the quality of its autumn light. The way the mountains appear on clear mornings at the end of every boulevard. You feel capable. You write Twilight of the Idols, The Antichrist, Nietzsche contra Wagner, and Ecce Homo, 4 books in a single year. Ecce Homo is autobiography, and its chapter titles are Why I Am So Wise, Why I Am So Clever, Why I Write Such Good Books, Why I Am a Destiny. Your letters from late 1888 begin to vibrate at a different frequency. You write that you are the greatest philosopher who has ever lived. You write that you are about to split history in 2. You write to the Danish philosopher Georg Brandes, who has just given the first university lectures on your work anywhere in the world, that you feel capable of anything. The letters are beautiful. They are also, clearly, the letters of a mind beginning to crack at its seams. By the time Turin arrives, the complete architecture of your thought is finished. Here it is, in the order it builds. God is dead. This is the starting point, not the destination. Published in the Gay Science, 1882, spoken through a character you call the madman, who lights a lantern in the morning and runs through the marketplace crying, I seek God! I seek God! The crowd laughs. The madman turns on them. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. He is not celebrating. He is horrified. He is announcing a catastrophe that the people around him are too comfortable to register. What Nietzsche means by God is dead is not, there was a God and he died. He means, the thing that used to hold Western civilization together, the shared framework of Christian values, the idea that life has inherent meaning given by a divine authority, the moral ground beneath every institution in European life, that thing is gone. The Enlightenment, science, rationalism, Darwin, they killed it. But civilization has not noticed yet. It is sitting in the ruins of a demolished building, still acting as if the roof is there. The crisis this creates is nihilism. If God is gone, and if meaning came from God, then life has no meaning. Nothing matters. This is the abyss. And Nietzsche's entire project, every book, every aphorism, every line of Zarathustra, is an attempt to answer. So what do we do now? His answer? We create. The will to power is not the desire to dominate other people. This is Elizabeth's distortion. It is what the Nazis made of it. The will to power is the fundamental drive to become more, to grow, to express and discharge your own nature fully. A tree grows by will to power. A composer creates by will to power. A philosopher thinks by will to power. It is life asserting itself. It is the opposite of resentment and the opposite of passivity. Master morality versus slave morality. When Nietzsche tears into Christianity and what he calls its slave morality, he is making a specific historical argument. The values of the oppressed, humility, meekness, patience, suffering as virtue, were originally weapons of the weak against the strong. You will suffer for your cruelty in the afterlife. God loves the poor and the humble. The meek shall inherit the earth. These were not universal truths in Nietzsche's reading. They were strategies invented by those without power, repackaged as absolute morality, and ultimately absorbed into every corner of Western life. Even secular Europeans, he argues, still live by Christian values without knowing it. They still punish strength, still sentimentalize suffering, still mistake mediocrity for goodness. The Übermensch, the eternal recurrence, Amor Fati, these are his answers to the nihilism question. Don't replace God with another absolute. Don't look for meaning to be given from above. Create it. Say yes to life as it is, not as it could be in some imagined afterlife. Demand the most of yourself not because someone is watching, but because the demand itself is the expression of your highest nature. This is what the philosophy says. And now here is what the man says. He weeps in a street in Turin over a horse. How do these two things coexist? A philosopher who preaches the hardest possible engagement with life, who mocks pity as weakness, who calls compassion a form of condescension, and a man who crosses a square at a run because an animal is suffering. The answer is that Nietzsche's hardness was always in the service of tenderness. He was not preaching cruelty. He was preaching the right to feel the full weight of existence without flinching away into comfortable lies. His attack on pity was an attack on a specific kind of pity, the pity that diminishes both the giver and the receiver, that says to the sufferer, "Your pain confirms my superiority, your weakness proves my strength." That kind of pity disgusted him. It was not love. It was power wearing love's face. What he felt in Turin on January 3rd was not that kind of pity. What he felt was something more primitive and more real, the immediate recognition of suffering in a creature who could not speak its own suffering. The horse didn't have philosophy. The horse didn't have Zarathustra. The horse just hurt. Nietzsche was a man of enormous sensitivity. We know this from the letters, from the music he composed, which is surprisingly tender for the philosopher of the hammer, from the way he was destroyed by Lou Salome's refusal, from the way he wrote about friendship. He built the philosophy of hardness partly because he needed it, because a man this sensitive, in a world with no transcendent ground underfoot, with no father, with no God, with no love returned, needed some structure of meaning that could hold. When it broke completely. After the collapse, his friend Franz Overbeck traveled to Turin to bring him back. He found Nietzsche singing and playing piano, sometimes incoherently. The landlord described episodes of increasingly strange behavior in the weeks before the horse. Overbeck and a dentist, wanting to move Nietzsche gently, pretended that a royal reception awaited him, and Nietzsche, who was by then fully in the grip of something irreversible, put on a nightcap as a crown and played the role of the royal guest with quiet dignity. He was transferred to a psychiatric clinic in Basel, then to Jena. His mother Franziska brought him home in March 1890. He sat. He looked out of windows. He played occasional notes on the piano. He knew faces sometimes, and sometimes he didn't. He said almost nothing. His mother died in 1897. Elizabeth returned from Paraguay, where her anti-Semitic colony had collapsed catastrophically, and where her husband, Bernhard Forster, had killed himself with poison, to take charge of her brother and his archive. She created the Nietzsche archive. She gathered the manuscripts. She edited them without understanding them. She assembled his unpublished notes into a volume called The Will to Power, a book Nietzsche had never written, in a shape he had never intended, organized to serve the nationalist ideology he had spent his entire career opposing. She forged nearly 30 letters. She withheld Ecce Homo, his intellectual autobiography, until 1908, 8 years after his death. Hitler attended her funeral in 1935. The philosopher who in print called anti-Semitism the most obscene of all the obscenities, who wrote in a letter that he felt physically ill when he was in the presence of German nationalism, became, through the work of his sister and the needs of the Third Reich, the unofficial philosopher of fascism. Friedrich Nietzsche died on August 25, 1900. He was buried beside his father at the church in Röcken. The son of the pastor, the killer of God, in the churchyard of God, beside the man whose death had started the question. Go back to Turin. Go back to the square. January 1889. The horse and the whip and the crowd. I have been asking all this time why he ran. I want to try to answer it now. He had spent 44 years building a philosophy that took death seriously. The death of his father, the death of his brother, the death of God. He had looked at the void that opens when you remove every comfortable lie about the universe, and he had not looked away. He had said, "This is what is real. Now what do we do? What do we do?" He had preached that the answer was creation, new values, forged from the hardest possible encounter with existence. He had preached strength and the will to live completely. He had preached Amor Fati, love of fate. But fate, in Turin, was a horse in a square and a man with a whip. And something in him recognized, in a way that bypassed every aphorism, every argument, every system, that the right response to suffering is not philosophy. The right response to suffering is to run. You run across the square. You wrap your arms around the neck of the animal because it hurts and it cannot say so, and you can. Because whatever vast philosophical structure you have built about the death of God and the creation of new values and the will to power, underneath all of it, you are still a child who grew up in a house where the pastor died and the brother died and no one explained it well enough. You are still the boy from Roken. Philosophy was what you made from the wound. The wound was always there. There is something important here for anyone who reads Nietzsche as a philosophy of cold power. Anyone who takes the hammer metaphors and the Übermensch and the anti-pity and uses it to justify hardness toward other people. They have read the system and missed the man. They have taken the armor and forgotten that armor exists because something underneath it is soft. Nietzsche was not hard. He was honest. There is a difference. The hard man doesn't run across the square. The hard man watches from a distance and notes that this is simply the nature of things. The hard man writes an aphorism about it later. Nietzsche ran. He held the horse. He wept. He lost everything that came after. The horse, for its part, didn't know any of this. Eventually, it walked away. We don't know where it went. We don't know if its owner ever treated it differently. We know nothing about the horse except that it refused to move and that a philosopher ran to it and held it and came undone. There is something almost theological about this image if you look at it from a certain angle. The man who killed God, undone by an act of grace. The preacher of the will to power, broken open by a force he had no name for. He would have had words for it once. Before January, he would have found the aphorism, "Mother, I am foolish." Maybe, but he ran. And whatever you think about the philosophy, whatever you think about the Übermensch and eternal recurrence and the genealogy of morals, you cannot watch a man run across a square toward a suffering animal and not recognize something true in the running. He lived for 11 more years. He wrote nothing. He said little. He looked out the window at whatever was there. He had spent his whole life asking what a human being should do in a world with no God and no given meaning. In the last moment he was fully himself, he showed us one answer. You run.